agriculture. We still have a lot more to say about agriculture, very important to Africa. Thank you for waiting to the very last minute. These are very important topics. Please do settle down. Yeah. Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine. My name is Fumi.
Hi, I'm Ted.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, so I'll just introduce you.
Tell me, will I have anything in front of me to see, or will I not?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, so you are Edward, or you're...
That's
okay,
Ted,
good.
Edward, doesn't matter.
Okay, yes, sir.
And
I'm
then
going to just go
do I
to...
move a slide with...
He's going to tell you. Please let's settle down. We have a solo presentation now. It's a solo presentation on agriculture, still very interesting. Please let's sit down. Let's settle down. It's just for 15 minutes and I can assure you it's going to be an engaging one. We're going to be talking about opportunities for investing in Southern African agriculture. And this is going to be taken by Edward Galante.
Thank you.
Did I get it right?
You did. You got it right.
Okay, and he is the executive director of Magwana Capital. Magwana Opportunity Fund Investment Committee member. He's been He's been a Magwana Opportunities Fund Investment Committee member since inception. He leads on agriculture and agribusiness for Magwana with a specific remit to develop Magwana's agriculture portfolio. So you need someone who is interested in agriculture. This is him, so please settle down. From a strategic point of view, he's been doing that for 4 years. Seasoned entrepreneur and financial expert. Previously, the CEO and founder of Zimbabwe's mortgage company. He's also the CEO and founder of Houses of Africa, board member on various investee companies and CBZ Holdings, and Zimbabwe's largest bank holding company. Please, let's welcome Edward Galante one more time. Please, let's clap for him. Thank you.
Thank you, dear. Thanks, everybody. Hi, guys. Can we have one meeting? Hello? Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's pretty funny. I was here in 2018, and nobody was talking about agriculture. Now, all of a sudden, it's agriculture, and sustainable agriculture. So it's really nice to see people coming back to the fold. I'm not going to spend time on the summary slide, but that's basically what we're going to cover today. I'm talking about agriculture in Southern Africa, which is basically SADC, which is where we invest. I'm the agriculture lead at Magwana Capital and Magwana Opportunities, which is a private equity fund based in Harare, Zimbabwe. We invest in Zimbabwe, and we also invest in the Southern African region. One of the unique things we do is we raise capital from local financial institutions. We have 40 local financial institutions, pension funds, and insurance companies that invest with us, and we deploy that money locally. It's a formula we are replicating in the region, and so it's quite interesting because it gives us access to intelligence in the region. There's 183 million hectares of land in sub-Saharan Africa. Only 5% of it is irrigated. It's a huge opportunity. We are on some of the portfolio company farms that we're farming on, we're seeing the impact of technology, irrigation systems, drone systems, all sorts of different technologies that are coming on. I won't spend a huge amount of time on that because I'm sure you all want to hear about how we're doing it and how we're investing. But basically the backdrop is the big driver is population growth. The statistics are obvious. Sub-Saharan Africa is going to grow from 1.3 to 4.3 billion people by the turn of the next century. The global population will be 9.5 billion. That is going to be a huge market and represent a huge demand for ag and its products. Where we are, we're fortunate. Interregional trade is actually expanding, and it's some of the best. It's some of the highest share of interregional trade integration amongst the world's emerging and developing economies. So we're very fortunate in that regard. It's higher economic growth relative to that of the rest of the world. So we've got the wind at our backs with a number of, from a number of standpoints. And the policy environment is improving. African governments have sort of recognized the fact that because 70% of the populations, certainly in the SADC region, 70% of the population is involved in agriculture. It's extremely important for as a policy initiative. So there's a number of there are a number of policy initiatives regionally which are also helping focus governments on ag. By the way, all of these photographs are from farms that we have invested in. So just to give you a sense, there's huge unexploited potential. We have Africa has half the planet's uncultivated land and huge water resources. Where we are in southern Africa, I mean, people don't know, countries like Botswana, for example, near the Francistown area, there's some of Botswana's biggest water resources, completely underutilized from an agricultural standpoint, totally underutilized. Zimbabwe has huge water resources, completely undeveloped. South Africa is similar. Zambia, big water resources, completely underdeveloped. Obviously, climate change and geopolitical disruption are now starting to focus people's attention. People used to think that Ukraine was stable. Well, that didn't turn out so well. So people are now focusing on Southern Africa as an investment destination, and a lot of the governments are starting to be alive to this, and certainly investors are alive to this. The lady in the previous session asked about how are you going to support farmers at the $1 to $3 million level, et cetera. People are starting to pay attention to that, and that's exactly where we're focusing on. There's growing infrastructure in the region. The transport networks are good. Rail could be improved, but the road networks are pretty good in the southern African part of the region. As you get further north, it gets a little dodgier. But where we're operating in the SADC region, we've got good transport and improving transport links. We have colleagues that have just built a new border post at Bight Bridge. There's a new bridge at Kazangula. There's a lot of investment going into infrastructure, and that makes it easier for our crops to get to market and for interregional trade, as we talked about earlier. And obviously, commodity prices are rising. It's not a real surprise. Governments have printed 30% more currency, so it's not entirely surprising that fertilizer costs have gone up, also with the conflict, excuse me, in Ukraine, but also because just general inflation is making inputs more expensive, but it's certainly driving the rise in commodity prices. So that's a good thing. Well, it's a double-edged sword from a farming standpoint, but from a commodity price standpoint, it's a good thing. And so there's an opportunity to increase productivity. If you look at the bottom slide, the little bitty blue line down at the bottom, that is sub-Saharan Africa's productivity. So there is some upside. The top line is the United States, which is highly mechanized, highly industrialized, and the UK and Denmark are up above those lines. But I think just in general, there's huge upside in terms of delivering productivity gains. And I think what's happening now with technology and with increasing investment and increasing literacy, agricultural literacy, I think you're going to see those productivity gains rise amazingly. We are big believers in ag tech, and we're seeing that applied not only to the larger commercial farms in which we invest, but to the surrounding communities. So drip irrigation, drone monitoring, crop and soil monitoring, bee vectoring is a really interesting new technology which has come out where not only pesticides but biological agents are added to the bees, and they're delivering them directly to the crops. Laser sorting in our processing facilities, in our pack houses, has completely changed, what's happening. And obviously product testing in the field or on site has cut down on costs. So let's cut to the chase. How do we do it, what we do? We invest in businesses in exactly the range that the lady was talking about, Susan, I think, was talking about, in the sort of $2 to $5 million ticket sizes. We invest in businesses that are successful or with people who are successful, who want to expand their businesses. We take equity stakes. We take minority stakes in those businesses. We generally try and identify and scale brownfield farms. We don't particularly like greenfield farms, but we will invest in greenfield farms if the promoter is also prepared to come in alongside us. We do not buy land. I moved to Zimbabwe almost 30 years ago. The first thing I did was buy a farm. Well, that didn't work out so well. I don't have a farm anymore. So we don't think that's a smart way to go, and it's not the right thing to do either. So we generally enter into long-term land use agreements which benefit the landowner or the parastatal that owns that land, and try and create a win-win situation. If we're successful on a long-term basis, they'll be successful on a long-term basis. I mentioned earlier that we're also backed by local pension funds. So in our case, we have millions of pensioners who have a direct interest in not having their farm taken away. So we have a political constituency that backs us unofficially, if you will. We only work with people we like, trust, and respect, and those are generally pretty good farmers, and we tap into that deep farming expertise that's been there for a long time and knows what they're doing. Now, those farmers know. They know beyond the shadow of a doubt that in order for them to be successful, their community has to be successful. They have worked for decades, in some cases multiple generations, on the same farms, and they understand that their success is community success. So that's what. So it's important that they then bring the community along. We bring expertise, financial structuring, and governance. There was a question before about putting together financial plans and doing all of that. We add that value to the farms, and then we help them with their financing methodologies. We employ structures to manage forex and political risk, and we create structures to enable exits through amalgamation, roll-ups, and listings. I'm going to give you two quick case studies on what we've done on a public-private basis. So at one of our farms, the EU came in and has funded a center pivot scheme for small-scale cattle farmers. The farm itself has a cattle program, but it needs input. So this 50-hectare pivot was funded by the European Union. The surrounding farmers bring their cattle there, and there's also a cattle business center with a veterinarian locally that can assist the community to look after their cattle. Those cattle are then fattened on this pivot on a cost recovery basis. In other words, there's not a profit for this. And at the end of that time, the commercial farm, can buy those cattle from the farmer directly and pay them, or the farmer can elect not to sell those cattle and pay for just the cost of fattening those cattle. Well, in Matabele land, where this farm is, in the wintertime, it's a drought situation. So these farmers are fattening their cattle on this farm, and it's working really, really well. It's a win-win. It's a win for the farmer. It's a win for the commercial farmer, and it's a win for the donor who came up with the funding to do that. So it's creating a huge amount of goodwill for the commercial farmer and with the community. The last one I'll talk about is at Southern Pecans, which is a business that we funded. There was an irrigation scheme in Kezi in southern Matabele land, which was basically defunct. It was built by the government of Zimbabwe back in the 90s. By the time we arrived in 2020, the dam was sort of silted up, the pipes weren't working, the pumps weren't working, the transformers nothing was working, and we had settlers actually hoeing and carrying water and irrigating underneath a non-functioning center pivot irrigation systems. We stepped in, did a deal with the community, did a 50-year land use agreement and said, we'll back the company to plant 150 hectares of pecans, we'll resurrect the 2 center pivots, and we'll sort out your 400 small-scale plots and assist you on an ongoing basis so that you, the community owners, can continue to farm here. It's been a tremendous success. The community is paid for the first 7 years before the pecan trees mature and start generating a crop. The community is paid in food. So they're paid in wheat and maize, which are grown under the center pivots that are there. And those pivots also help to offset and defray the cost of fertilizing and looking after the trees. After the 7 years, the community has the option to either get a portion of the revenue from the entire farm or to continue with the food at their option. At the end of 50 years, they own the project. Meanwhile, we've employed 200 people there, and are starting to transfer skills and are transferring horticultural skills to the community. So after 50 years, they will own this community, they will own this entire pecan plantation of 150 hectares, which is a large-scale commercial enterprise. So we're very proud of that scheme and would love to replicate that scheme. And what's happened is other communities in the area with similar defunct irrigation schemes have come to us to say, look, could you replicate this? So our big focus is on working with our commercial farmers on regenerative farming and ESG practices. We think that that as I said before, these farmers understand that in order to be successful, they have to work with the local communities. One of the things we've been working with recently is with people like the Savory Institute on creating regenerative agricultural systems. So if you have a large-scale orchard, for example, we have almost 500 hectares of pecans on several different farms. There's an opportunity now to regenerate the soil in between the trees. So we're starting to run sheep in between the trees, build carbon sinks in between the trees, and got it. And so we're very focused on the regen story. I think that's my time up, but I'm happy to take a question or two if anybody hasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. Firstly, are there any countries in the SADC region you're not interested in?
We're not particularly interested in the Lusophone countries just because of the legal and language barriers. So Angola would be a stretch for us. That would be a stretch for us. But I think Mozambique, we're looking at stuff in Mozambique. We like Mozambique. Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia. We like those countries. All of those countries. We're not interested in South Africa. It's a developed economy, so we're not farming there.
And then is there any farming methodology or farming practice that you're not interested in?
Yeah, we're not particularly interested in row crops. They talk about maize and wheat and what have you. We're not particularly interested because we find that governments meddle in the prices and the production of those crops. And so therefore it's not, we're only interested really in hard dollar export crops or import substitution crops. For example, bananas. Bananas are a local crop that is a dollar crop, and we like farming bananas because, you know, we get paid in dollars and we get paid generally before they collect the bananas. So we like that.
Aquaculture?
Not yet, but we're looking. We're looking at an aquaculture business in Mozambique. Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Agricultural processing.
Agricultural processing.
Correct.
We've just funded an agricultural value-added business. It's not a processing business, but we're looking at processing. I think people are scared by primary agriculture, and I don't quite understand why. I guess on a small-scale basis, it can be scary. We would like to move downstream, but we'd like to do that to vertically integrate some of our existing businesses. I think that's the way we'd like to do it. So, for example, in the pecan business, we'd very much like to build a pecan cracking and sorting plant in due course when we get up to several thousand hectares of pecans. That's the sort of idea. So, yes.
Thanks. Susan Payne from Holistic Investments. I like what you say about bananas and sheep between the crops and before we see the trees, which we also have, by the way, and the carbon sinks. I mean, all of that resonates very completely. But can you just explain what percentage of a business that you are interested in taking when you are an equity investor?
Yeah, we only take a significant minority interest. We always like to have the farmer have skin in the game, or the major partner have skin in the game. So we like to take a significant minority interest, and we like to back successful people who want to grow their businesses. We're not interested in owning 100% of the business. We're only interested in helping successful people become more successful. Yeah? Anybody else? Thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edward. I believe we'll all agree that that was a good session. And then we'll come to the final session for today. And the topic is evolving agri-tech driving food security. And to moderate that session is Annette Chow. Please, can we have all the panelists on the stage? Thank you.